What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Sending Off Sports. This is our podcast series, and today I'm joined by Amr Muhammad, and pretty much what we're going to talk about, today's Monday. We had the opening week of the NFL season, and we still have some football games on tonight. The Rams are playing the Raiders, Jets, and Lions, but we're going to, pretty much we're going to go through every single team, and we're just going to give a couple quick opinions about, how they looked in week one. I know it's early on, you can't, people are still learning the playbook, but we're just going to talk about what we saw out on the field. And at the very end, once we're done with that, Mr. Amr Muhammad is going to give his take on what's been going on with Nike, Kaepernick, because, he's very passionate about the subject.
Of course.
So first, let's jump right into it. And first team that we're going to talk about really quick, Arizona Cardinals. They played the Washington Redskins. They lost 24-6. And, what we saw, David Johnson's back in the mix. Their MVP caliber running back. He was only given 9 carries. And again, you're trying to work him back into the groove of things. He's coming off a major injury. But, they didn't look very good at all. And the Washington Redskins, they had pretty much a makeshift backfield. They just named Adrian Peterson their starting running back, and he tore it up. He did his thing. He became, I believe, the 9th or 10th man. I think it's 9th man in NFL history with
not a surprise.
With 100 rushing touchdowns. You're a big fan of all day?
Big fan,
Adrian Peterson?
Great guy.
Great guy?
Yeah.
What about when he beat his kids? Do you remember that? Or you don't remember that?
I do, but if we're talking about sports, great man.
All right. David Johnson, he did score a touchdown, but they didn't look very good at all. Sam Bradford's longest passing play was 27 yards, and he had a mere 4.5 yards per attempt. Didn't look very good, so we'll see how they bounce back next week.
Word.
Next, we are doing this alphabetically. You can tell the trend. Next is the Atlanta Falcons. They had the opening game against the Philadelphia Eagles. They lost 18-12, and the weather was a factor. It was the first game of the season. A lot of the first stringers aren't getting as many reps as they should in the preseason, but they just didn't look good at all. I don't know what's going on with Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, but you have a weapon like Julio Jones. You have a target that big, that skilled, that dominant. I just don't understand. When they're in the red zone, it seems Matty Icy's either throwing picks or he just can't finish. Him and Julio just can't link up.
It's a big problem. It's a big problem right now, and if this keeps up, they won't be able to make it to the playoffs. So,
expert analyst from Amr Muhammad. No, listen, Atlanta's definitely going to make the playoffs, but just week one, I don't know what's going on with the red zone trips, and then from the defensive side of the ball, again, it was a very sloppy game. It's not Nick Foles was starting for Philly and he didn't look like Carson Wentz, but it's a sloppy game. We'll see how they bounce back, but I just don't know what's going on with him and Julio. They just can't seem to find that connection like they should be. Next, Baltimore Ravens. They absolutely smoked the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo Bills are going to be the worst team in the league this year, 100%. They won 47-3. Listen, is Joe Flacco elite? No, probably not. But he has one hell of an arm.
Yes.
He is very durable, and he's a lot better than Lamar Jackson right now. The Buffalo Bills, they were starting Nate Peterman, and if that name sounds remotely familiar before yesterday's game, it's because he's the guy who threw 5 picks in the first half of a game.
I saw that. Just terrible. And they try to justify it in the press conference. They were like, it was like, oh, it happens to every QB once in a while. No, that shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, but listen, Josh Allen's definitely the quarterback of the future for the Bills. He has his problems with inaccuracy. We saw that at Wyoming. But, just looking at this game, Joe Flacco, he went 25 for 34 for 236 yards, 3 touchdowns. I guess I really think, and you could see it in the preseason, just how much better he looked than Lamar Jackson. Even RG3 looked better than Lamar Jackson in the preseason. I think just, when a team drafts a quarterback in the first round, you expect that they want to play that man.
Yeah.
And I think when Joe Flacco, he sees that, he's like, all right, it kind of lit a fire under his ass, and he's like, I got to pick it up. So yeah, I mean the Bills, their offensive line is rebuilding. Defensively, they definitely taken some big losses, and I mean Nate Peterman. You lose Tyrod Taylor. That's a very consistent quarterback. He's not going to make a lot of mistakes. Did not look good. But the Ravens definitely looked good. So they did a great job. Next, we already touched on the Buffalo Bills. I don't have much to say about them. Nate Peterman was an absolute joke. Hopefully Josh Allen can come and do some stuff. I have LaShawn McCoy in my fantasy team. He was not very effective at all. 7 rushing attempts for 22 yards. But, that's what's expected when the opposing defense, and the Ravens do have a pretty solid defense. That's what's expected when they have no respect for your passing game. That's regular. So, Buffalo Bills will hope to recoup. I think that again, they're the worst team in the league from top to bottom. Next, Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers they won 16-8 against the Cowboys. Defensively, very stout. And again, people knew that the Dallas Cowboys would have question marks going into this season on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, definitely on the defensive side of the ball, but also on the offense, because that receiving core is, Cole Beasley, Allen Hurns. I don't know. Definitely no clear number ones. But, defensively, Carolina looks stout. Luke Kuechly, they had some big losses. Greg Olsen had to come out of the game. Luke Kuechly got banged up. But, they have, you have some ageless wonder like Julius Peppers who could still get after the quarterback. He's a beast. And, with the hiring of Norv Turner as the offensive coordinator, we saw a little bit different side, or we expected to see a different side of Carolina. But at the end of the day, it's still the Cam Newton show, still with RPOs, run pass options. Him and McCaffrey, McCaffrey, you have a very versatile weapon. I expect him to get a lot of touches, a lot of receptions this year. And I mean, Carolina, they kind of looked like Carolina for most of Cam's career, where they keep putting the ball in his hands. He's going to run. He's going to be mobile. He's going to scramble. Can you win a Super Bowl with that style of play? I don't think so, but, they did what they had to do against the Dallas Cowboys, and their defense looked really well. It looked really good, I should say. But, we'll have to see what happens, because, again, I don't think, you have Zeke coming back, and Dak is okay, but I don't think the Cowboys pose much of an offensive threat. Next, and I mean, this game was unbelievable. The Chicago Bears, we're gonna when the Packers are up, I'm gonna really touch on them and go deep into that. But Chicago Bears, man, I mean, they made the trade for Khalil Mack. They paid that man $141 million deal. And listen, in the NFL, you need the quarterback, you need to protect the quarterback, and you need to disrupt the quarterback. And now with the Chicago Bears, you already have a good defense there. You have Quan Smith. You have a lot of really fast linebackers. Khalil Mack arguably had the greatest half a defensive player has ever had. I mean, talk to me what you saw out there.
The man was genius. He knew what to do. He looked like he was killing it out there in the field.
Yeah, we saw what he did to Deshaun Kaiser. He just ripped the ball right out of his hands, forced a fumble. He also had a pick six. And, he was going against right tackle Brian Bulaga. And, he's no scrub. And he was just overwhelming him, bull rushing him. I mean, it was a sight to see out there. But again, he was on a snap count because he didn't have a full training camp.
How about them not playing defensively and doing the stupid mistake the fourth quarter that cost them the game? And
the Chicago Bears.
Yeah.
Listen, one thing you could definitely see with the Chicago Bears, they definitely took their foot off the gas, and they played a lot more conservative. After the whole reason they were up that big is because they were putting all that pressure on the quarterback. They definitely, they eased up a little. Chicago Bears on the offensive side of the ball, Mitch Trubisky and some of the offensive plays that they were running, especially on that first drive, a lot of creative stuff. It looked like a college offense out there. A lot of creative stuff, a lot of, option play. Allen Robinson looked good. Tyler Gabriel looked good. But, Mitchell Trubisky, I think he definitely showed flashes. But we'll have to see because I don't think I'm totally sold on him Green Bay, of course, they won 24-3. Unbelievable freaking game, unbelievable. And we'll have to see what happens with Chicago, because now if Mitch Trubisky could be that legit starting quarterback and not just a Blake Bortles like a game manager, then Chicago can make a lot of noise.
Yes.
Next, Cincinnati Bengals, they beat the Colts 34-23. Listen, I'm not going to lie, I didn't really watch much of this game besides some Andrew Luck highlights because, he was back from his injury. He looked pretty good. He threw 2 touchdowns. Andy Dalton, he completed 21 of 28 passes. He touched 2 touchdowns. He threw 2 touchdowns. He had an interception, but running back Joe Mixon produced 149 yards from scrimmage with a score as well. I think that's the real key to what's going to make it the Bengals. They also have a good defense, but Bengals, Colts, these are 2 teams that up in the balance. I don't really know what to make of their seasons. We'll have to see. It's only week 1. Andy Dalton, he has a gun, red rifle, but we'll have to see what to make about him. Next, the Cleveland Browns, and this was a very interesting game. They played the Pittsburgh Steelers. They tied 21-21. You never want to see that, but they did end a 17-game losing streak, which is good.
Yes.
And they're 0-1. Their 1 tie to start the season is actually their best start to a season since 2004, which is depressing. But hey, I mean, you just looking at Hugh Jackson's face when that field goal got blocked. It was sad. I felt bad for him. But what was good is that Ben Roethlisberger got sacked 4 times. They forced 6 turnovers. Denzel Ward had 2 interceptions. What's his face? Myles Garrett, he was a nuisance. He was the dominant pass rusher that, the reason why he was brought to Cleveland as the number 1 overall pick. Tyrod Taylor, he was 15 of 40 passing, which isn't amazing at all. You definitely want more out of him, but in my opinion anyways, it's just inevitable for Baker Mayfield to get thrown into the fire because he is the number 1 overall pick. You didn't pick him to sit him, so we'll see when that comes around. Josh Gordon scored a touchdown. It's great to see him back in the game. And then, the Browns, I was really rooting for them. I wanted them to get that win, especially after Hard Knocks, and I'm a big Baker Mayfield guy. So, we'll have to see. But they look good, especially defensively. And then, Pittsburgh has a lot of turmoil, too. We'll get into that later. But Cleveland looks solid. Dallas Cowboys, really quick, I already spoke about them. Dak Prescott just didn't look very good at all. His biggest target was Cole Beasley, 7 receptions for 73 yards. But he doesn't have a game changer, a true number 1. Zeke was limited. Defensively, they were okay. But, I already spoke about them. They weren't impressive at all. They need to definitely make some tweaks. Next, Denver Broncos. Case Keenum, brand new, getting the start against the Seattle Seahawks. They won 27-24. And, the biggest thing that I saw is that they were able to definitely force turnovers.
Hell yeah.
With Von Miller, he had 3 sacks. You also have Bradley Chubb. They were able to get to the quarterback. The Seahawks are definitely a rebuilding team. These are not the Legion of Boom that we were accustomed to seeing for the last 4 or 5 years. That's over. Richard Sherman's in San Francisco. Earl Thomas, he had an interception. He looks solid, but at the end of the day, Case Keenum, 329 yards, 3 touchdowns, also threw 3 picks. Denver's one of those teams, I don't really know what to make of them. They could get to the quarterback. They had some big losses in the secondary, but we'll have to see. I don't know if I'm buying into them. What do you think about Denver?
No. I don't think they'll do well this season. I think probably an average team.
Hey, yeah, so we'll see because Case Keenum is definitely an upgrade from Trevor Siemian and what they, Paxton Lynch and that whole ordeal. But we'll have to see. Tonight we have the Detroit Lions. I'm not going to touch on them. They're playing the Jets. They haven't played yet. All right, this is the big one.
Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers.
Hey.
What a beast.
Listen,
man came out and he performed.
I will say one thing. I saw everyone on Twitter. They've been like bloviating about Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, saying, "Hey, Aaron Rodgers is the GOAT." Listen, he's not the GOAT. Tom Brady's the GOAT.
Nah, well, Tom Brady is the GOAT, but
if you want to talk about best like pure passer you've ever seen, I understand that. But at the end of the day,
great performance. You can't lie.
At the end of the day, like, all right, listen, I don't want to talk about Tom Brady right now. I'll get to the Patriots, but this performance, you know, he had to get carted off the field. Very Willis Reed, Paul Pierce in the NBA Finals-esque. You know, people weren't sure if it was going to be a long-term injury that could have, you know, knocked him out for the season. There was a 17-point deficit. You know, Rodgers already said he's going to be playing next week, which is good news for the Packers fans. But, I mean, the comeback, there's not much to say. On that one, you know, deep ball to Allison, if you just watch his eyes and how he's able to get the secondary away from the man he's actually targeting, you know, because, you know, secondaries will always try to cheat, read the quarterback's eyes, and you just see him that whole play. He's looking downfield left, I believe, looking over to Devontae Adams, and then he just throws an absolute dime to Allison for the touchdown, and then we saw what happened in the last play with Randall Cobb. I mean, he you know, he's definitely the most. You could make the argument he's the most talented quarterback of all time.
Yes.
Best arm. Like, he makes some throws that practically no one else can make on a consistent basis. He's mobile, and he was on one leg yesterday. So, I mean, it was some crazy stuff to behold.
Yes.
That's for sure. But I will say one thing about the Packers: their defense needs to tighten up. They got some stops at the end of the game, but you know, in that first half, they could not touch the Bears and Mitch Trubisky. All right, next, Houston Texans. This is a personal favorite of mine because, you know, the quarterback is Deshaun Watson. They lost 27-20 to the Pats. But, you know, Deshaun Watson, he finished the game 17-34, 176 yards with a touchdown. And he also threw a pick. He ran 8 times for 40 yards. But listen, he's coming back from the ACL tear. You don't want him running a lot. It's only week 1. I expect him to tighten up more. And they are playing the Patriots. So, you know, on paper, the Patriots don't look very well. But they've been doing this for years. We've been talking about their receiving core being, you know, pedestrian at best. And, you know, I expect a lot of, you know, the Pats are still going to be the Pats.
Yeah.
So we'll see. The Texans, they didn't look amazing. Deshaun didn't look as sharp as you would like him to be. Definitely not as sharp as Andrew Luck after missing on that time. But, you know, we saw what he did. He tore up the league. This is a guy I expect to be an MVP candidate in the future. So we'll see how it goes, you know, in week 2.
Of course.
Indianapolis Colts, we already touched on them. They lost 34-23 to the Cincinnati Bengals. But Andrew Luck, I mean, you have to be encouraged what you saw out of him. He looked good. He looked sharp. I mean, I don't really know what to make about the rest of the team. And the defense, you know, they drafted Quentin Nelson out of Notre Dame to protect him. You know, the big guard, he's a stud. But, you know, I don't know what to make about him. But, you know, now you have the franchise back. Just protect that, man. You can't keep taking these hits.
Of course.
Next, Jacksonville Jaguars. They played my New York Football Giants. They beat them 20-15. I'm gonna wait, you know, until the Giants come up to really get into it in depth. But I mean, their defense is something else. The Giants couldn't really do anything on second down, which kept forcing these 3rd and long situations. But the speed of their linebackers, Calais Campbell is a monster. Listen, what we saw from Jalen Ramsey, he's a bigger corner. He matches up better with like a Julio, even maybe a Gronk. But someone like who has some wiggle to him, like Antonio Brown, OBJ. OBJ had 11 receptions yesterday for 111 yards. He didn't score a touchdown, but he did very well. And hey, you know, besides of that big rush, 68-yard run from Saquon Barkley, he only had 2.2 yards per carry, and that is what
That's what matters.
That's what the Jaguars are all about. Their defense and their running game. But we did see Leonard Fournette leave the game with a hamstring injury, so we'll have to check on him. But their defense is stout. Blake Bortles completed only 54.5% of his passes, and there was also a 32-yard pick six from Miles Jack. Typical Eli. They gave him an 11-point lead going into the fourth quarter. So the defense and the running game is what's going to make the Jaguars, not Blake Bortles. Kansas City Chiefs. They won 38-28. Against the Chargers. Chargers were seen to be one of those teams that was going to be, not even a sleeper, but I think they could definitely be a Super Bowl contender with the pieces that they have on paper. And you look what they did. Patrick Mahomes, just that arm is once in a generation. 256 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. Tyreek Hill had an unbelievable game. He had 7 receptions for 169 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also returned a punt for 91 yards for a touchdown. When you have weapons like that, Kareem Hunt, Travis Kelce wasn't involved, but expecting week 2 to definitely get more looks going his way. Kansas City, they allowed 541 yards of offense, but the defense did force 2 turnovers. But that wasn't the reason they won. At the end of the day, it's the big plays. It's the big arm from Patrick Mahomes. That they have some playmakers too, so look out for that. They looked good. Chargers. One of the real talking points of the Chargers and what makes them such a AFC West favorite is the defense. And they didn't look very good. But Joey Bosa missed the game. That's huge. So, that's a big reason Mahomes didn't have as much pressure on him. I expect players like Melvin Ingram to really step it up. Again, it's only week 1, so you don't expect all these guys to look as good as possible. But, Phillip Rivers didn't do any favors either. Actually, I take that back. Phillip Rivers, what am I saying? He had 424 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception at 36. Now, he looked good. And so I definitely take that back. Again, there was a lot of games on last night. You can't expect me to watch all of them. But, the Chargers, I expect them to bounce back. Tight end Hunter Henry, he was out for the season with a torn ACL now, which isn't great. But expect Melvin Gordon to be one of the real focal points for this offense. And, most of the running backs, anyways, you expect to not just carry the ball, but receive it as well. Los Angeles Rams can't touch on because they're playing tonight. Again, these are one of the most talented teams on paper. We saw, they inked Aaron Donald, Ndamukong Suh, Aqib Talib, and you still have players like Todd Gurley, the MVP, Jared Goff, so I expect them to be strong. All right, next, Miami Dolphins. They played the Tennessee Titans. They beat them 27-24. Ryan Tannehill back from injury. He did toss a pair of interceptions, but he looked efficient on his way back. He was 20 of 28, 230 yards and 2 touchdowns. Running backs like Frank Gore, Kenny and Drake, they were effective on the ground. The 2 combined for 109 yards on 23 carries, which, you like to see. That's efficient. Biggest takeaway, the defense. They had 3 picks. Also, Jakeem Grant, he did return a kickoff for 102 yards and a score. Kenny Stills holding 4 passes for 106 yards, 2 touchdowns, including a 75-yard pass. So, Dolphins, I don't really know what to make of them. Titans didn't have Marcus Mariota out there, so they looked good, but, again, I don't really know what to make of them. You still have the Patriots in that division. The Patriots are still the favorite in my eyes. Next, Minnesota Vikings. And the Vikings, Kirk Cousins looked like, he just got inked that big deal. And, Kirk Cousins, I like what I saw out there from him. I thought he did his thing. Now you have Dalvin Cook. He's back, 95 yards from scrimmage. He's healthy. Kirk Cousins, he was 20 of 36 for 244 yards and 2 touchdowns. And, again, the calling card for the Vikings is the defense, and we saw what they did, 3 picks against Jimmy G. I expect to see them dominate just like that in the future. Of course, they only won 24-16, but that defense caused a lot of problems. New England Patriots, again, they beat the Texans 27-20. People expect Brady to fall off at some point. Again, efficient, 277 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception against the Texans, and that's a defense they can put pressure on you. Surprisingly, the Patriots defense, which was a disaster in 2017, was pretty efficient. But at the end of the day, they did make big stops when it mattered the most. They forced 2 turnovers and sacked Watson 3 times. So we'll have to see what happens. One of the biggest surprises maybe that Rex Burkhead is that's who they're leaning on, the Pats, for the running game. 64 yards on 18 carries, So I don't know really what to make of him. Sonny Michel, once he's healthy, I expect him to get, the bulk of the workload. But, the Patriots, listen, Patriots are known early in the season not to be great, but they're always going to turn it on. New Orleans Saints. I just want to bunch them and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in one topic right now. That game was the definition of an absolute shootout. Ryan Fitzpatrick outperformed Drew Brees. Ryan Fitzpatrick, let me get the numbers here just so I can, I don't want to botch this. 417 passing yards, rushed for 36, scored 5 total touchdowns. He had 1 rushing touchdown, 4 passing. Mike Evans and Deshaun Jackson, who each had 147, 146 yards respectively. They were great. The Buccaneers, I don't expect this because Fitzpatrick, he does this all the time. He did it with that one season with the Jets when he had weapons like Eric Decker, Brandon Marshall, where he looks great. He looks like he could be a franchise guy. So I'm not going to, make too much into this. But, Drew Brees also had 439 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. But Alvin Kamara, he rushed for 29, which isn't great. Did have 112 receiving and scored 3 times, so he still had a big game. Michael Thomas had a huge game, 16 receptions, 180 yards. But at the end of the day, this is a team in the Saints that we're expecting to go to the Super Bowl or is a favorite in the NFC. So, I hope we see a little bit of defense. Come on now. Fitzpatrick. Let me just skip some of the teams that, Jets are playing tonight. Can't talk about them. Oakland Raiders. All right, so let's talk about the New York Football Giants, shall we?
Let's go.
They lost 20-15 to Jacksonville. Last season they were 3-13. I expect them to be a lot better. I'm hoping for at least 7-8 wins. I hope. Odell, he was solid. 11 receptions for 111 yards. But,
you think a playoff team or?
I don't know. In this NFC, who knows? The NFC is stacked. But I will say one thing. The 2 biggest takeaways, or the 3 biggest takeaways, offensive line. Again, offensive line, it's a unit. You need some experience together. You need to work together. But the offensive line was not good at all. Eric Flowers is an absolute train wreck. You need to protect Eli. And they didn't do that. Eli, again, he started the game really efficient, but at some point, I don't blame him because he didn't have the protection. But Evan Ingram, I expect him to be a lot bigger factor next week because, he only had 2 catches for 18 yards. He had a huge drop as well, too. But, again, your 2 biggest playmakers, the defense did look good. Jack Rabbit, Janoris Jenkins had a beautiful interception. But, our 2 biggest playmakers, Saquon Barkley and Odell Beckham Jr., they played well. We saw Saquon's big run. We saw his also that one play where he cut back and, he trucked Jalen Ramsey. That shows you the type of back he is. He has some wiggle to him. He can cut back. And he's also, he's definitely also can lay he can lay a hit down, and he could take a hit. So, it was encouraging from that. Odell looks healthy, but the offensive line definitely needs to tighten up. And just to wrap up right here, we have a few more teams. I'm not going to talk about the Seahawks too much. I already spoke about them. Pretty much, it's Russell Wilson and just pray at this point. I don't really know what to make about them, but I'm not too confident about them going into this season. Philadelphia Eagles, they have a great team. Once Carson Wentz, the whole trick with them, you just hope Nick Foles can do the job until Carson Wentz comes back. And once he comes back, all will be right in the world. Jay Ajayi, he played well. He had a pair of rushing touchdowns. The defense is the defense is stout, to say the least, and they're gonna do a good job. Pittsburgh. Great offensive line. James Conner, he rushed for more than 130 yards, 2 touchdowns. We know what's going on with Le'Veon Bell, but Pittsburgh. I just don't know how they could be so good for so many years with this many locker room issues and turmoil. You have playmakers all over the field. They're going to be one of the better teams in the AFC, but we'll have to see. I just don't know what's going to happen with Le'Veon, and that's the biggest thing, because every day the questions are going to be coming in. Le'Veon. So we'll have to see what happens with that. San Francisco 49ers, Jimmy G. Definitely wasn't the dream week 1 that he expected after going 5-0 at the end of last season. Threw 3 picks. 49ers had some key injury blows. Their starting guard, Mike Person, was forced to leave the game, as was their backup, Joshua Garnett. A lot of injuries. It just wasn't a good game, especially start week 1 against the Minnesota Vikings, best defense in the NFL last year. So we'll have to see how that goes. But I expect big things from Jimmy G. I like him.
Of course.
We spoke about Tampa Bay. Tennessee didn't look good at all. Mariota, elbow injury, not very good. Offensive tackle. Taylor Lumina got a concussion. Delaney Walker suffered an ankle injury. So Tennessee, I don't expect to make any noise this season. Washington Redskins, just to close off on all the teams on week 1. I mean, the Redskins, they look solid. I mean, Alex Smith, not so much, in very Alex Smith fashion, 21 completions, 13 of them went to running backs and tight ends. So you expect a lot of dink, a lot of safe plays. That's what you expect from Alex Smith. You have a ceiling with him. He's a good game manager. He'll get you to the playoffs. I don't know if he's going to get this Redskin team to the playoffs. But Adrian Peterson and Chris Thompson, they combined for 161 yards, 131 yards receiving, and 2 touchdowns. So, I mean, they did their job where it mattered most in terms of bottling up David Johnson. They first forced 2 turnovers. So it was a good week 1 for the Redskins, which I'm not happy about as a Giants fan. So now I just did a very long-winded recap of every single team in the NFL from week 1 besides the Rams, Raiders, and Jets, Lions, because they're playing tonight on Monday Night Football. So now really quick, let's just talk about Amr. Yes. Why I brought you on the show. I didn't bring you here to look pretty. Talk to me about what you make of the recent Colin Kaepernick and Nike situation.
Listen,
and speak your mind, open your heart. This is Sending Off Sports.
Okay, so Nike had this all planned out. Like, you knew this from the beginning. They would never advertise an advertisement without them making money. And today I just showed up the facts, and it looks like Nike's sales went up by 31%. So that whole situation with you burning your Nike sneakers or your Nike products is just bullshit, right? Because you burning it, you bought the Nike gear from the first place, right? You burning it doesn't do nothing. You could boycott Nike, but that's pretty stupid yourself, because Colin Kaepernick, he's not kneeling down to disrespect veterans, and it came from a veteran. The idea came from a veteran itself. So we got to get this stupid mentality out of our brain that this is for me disrespecting military members or police officers, right? This is to bring a bigger issue at hand, and that's the black injustice in America.
Yeah, what people have to realize is, and this is one of the biggest things that Donald Trump, what he did with the protests and how he hijacked it. This was never protesting the military. This wasn't protesting America, et cetera, et cetera. This was protesting racial injustice and, specifically police brutality to people of color, the African American community. So one thing too, with people when they're going crazy about him taking a knee and F Kaepernick, F the NFL now, and now F Nike, what people also fail to realize is that Colin Kaepernick spoke to former Seahawks player and Green Beret Nate Boyer. So this is a veteran who told him that taking a knee, he wrote an open letter to Kaepernick, taking a knee would be the perfect middle ground for, to show respect, pay homage, but at the same time you're still protesting, and then people know what you're trying to do, and you're getting your point across.
Also recently they interviewed the guy, the U.S. Navy SEAL who killed Osama bin Laden, like the guy who's like the most patriotic of men, right? And he says he doesn't mind what Colin Kaepernick is doing, and that whole Nike situation is just bullshit. Yeah. And it's a bigger issue at hand, and we like people has to start realizing this, right? Because this is a bunch of stupidity what people are posting out there, and like the Colin Kaepernick situation, it's you guys have to think and like broaden your like expansion.
Yeah, just not be as ignorant.
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest thing with Kaepernick at this point, I mean,
one guy in my ethics class, he told me like, so was it respectful if when Colin Kaepernick wore the pigs, like it was a picture of police officers on his socks and it says pigs, so he was like what is it respectful that he's wearing that stuff, right? He was like that's why he shouldn't kneel. He's disrespecting our police members. What do you think about that?
I mean, to that, man, I don't know. Like,
I think that's the problem with the English language. I think it's him like saying like pigs. He doesn't mean it like, oh, like fuck the cops. I think it's like oh, like there's a problem with the cops, and
listen. The thing is, there's a lot of good cops out there, but at the same time, and I know because I have friends that have either family members that are police officers. Yeah. Listen, there's racist cops, there's sexist cops, there's a lot of bad cops out there too.
Yeah.
That give a bad name to all the good ones out there.
Yeah.
That are really trying to do good in the community. But listen, at the end of the day with Colin Kaepernick, it sucks what happened. He's become a martyr for this situation. He had to pretty much give up his NFL career.
Yep.
The NFL is definitely blackballing him. He's definitely good enough to be on an NFL team. One problem might be that he wants to be a starter, and I don't know if necessarily
he would be a starter.
Because, there's a lot of good quarterbacks, especially in the NFC. The NFC is stacked these days. But, listen, from a football perspective, it would be great to see him back in the NFL, but I just don't know if a team's going to do that now. Because, most of these owners, they just care about the bottom line. And, This also brings up another issue at hand with the concussions. The NFL is also, like, trying to... The NFL is not a very well, like, thought out, organized. Listen, I was not expecting you to go to there. I wasn't expecting you to go there with the concussions, but that's a whole different ball game. That's a whole conversation for another day.
Yeah.
But one thing about the NFL for sure, they're very archaic and very ancient, very slow to change. The NBA, when new policies, they're very quick. You don't see players.
There's more vocal players, I would say, in the NBA than the NFL.
Yeah, the NFL. I mean, the players in the NBA, there's also a lot less of them, and they're not wearing the helmets. You could see them, you could identify with them. The NFL, it's definitely more about the team. It's about the shield. NBA is more about the brand.
Yeah.
But Amr, it was great to have you on today's podcast.
Thank you.
For you to express yourself and your passionate opinions on the situation.
Of course.
This is Andrew Schauder.
I'm Muhammad.
Sending off sports.